Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. As you can see, I have my lab coat on and we are going to be talking science today. In particular, we're going to be talking about human remains. We're going to be talking about these human remains. And I'm going to go into detail about how we look at skeletons, how we find out their ethnicity, how we find out where they came from, how we can find out their biological sex, and how we can find out some stuff to do with their life from their diet. And in regards to this skeleton, the things that they were buried with can tell us also a bit of information about who they may have been in life. This skeleton here is referred to as the Ivory Bangle lady. She was found in York, and as I keep saying, it's a she. Yes, this skeleton is a female skeleton, and I will go into details how we know that. But first we're going to focus on this top half. We know from looking at this lady's skull that she is of African descent, and we know this through the nose structure and through other telltale signs throughout your body. You see, your body is actually a patchwork of your ancestry. It's not as black and white as we like to think. When we look at skeletons, there's lots of markers throughout the skeleton that helps us to find out what ethnicity somebody is. But to just look at the skull, we go through the facial features. How we know that this skeleton is a female is that up there. Can you see the pelvis just up there, the hips? They're a bit broken. But thankfully for this skeleton, she is pretty much a complete skeleton. So we look at the hips to find out what sex somebody is. Sometimes we can also use the skull as well, but we have been very fortunate in regards to this skeleton that she does actually have her hips. Now, as a rule, women's hips tend to be wider to help accommodate us having babies, whereas men's hips tend to be more narrower. But this isn't always the case, because you can get some quite effeminate men and quite masculine females, which can throw us off a little bit. But as a rule, we look at the hips to find out the sex of a skeleton. So we know, for example, this skeleton here is a female. We also know she didn't have any children before she died, because her hips haven't moved. When this lady died, she was in her late teens, early 20s, and we're able to find out roughly how old somebody is, one from the wear and tear of the body, but another thing we use is the skull. So on your skull, you might not be able to see very clearly on this image here, but on your skull you have these wiggly lines. They're known as cranial scrutures, and depending on the thickness of those cranial scrutures, we can get an idea of how old somebody is. We also can use the teeth, and as I already said, you can look at the bones as well, just from everyday wear and tear. Same goes for your teeth as well, again, everyday wear and tear. Another thing you can learn by looking at the teeth is you can find out what someone's diet was. We can find out roughly where somebody came from as well. Because in your earlier years of development, everything you eat and everything you drink has a little signature in it from the area you're from. And we're able to get an analysis from your teeth to find out whereabouts in the world you've come from. In regards to this lady, we know that she is of African descent, and we know that she was not born in England, but yet she died here. And we can see that through her teeth. We can also find out if there's any stressful moments in people's lives, such as if there's famine or warfare, anything like that, by looking at lines on the teeth when we take analysis of it. So that's just some of the things we're able to learn from the bones. Unfortunately, in regards to Our Lady, we don't know how she actually died because it just doesn't show on the bones, so it's very likely that she could possibly have died from an illness, something like that. We know it wasn't childbearing because we've seen evidence of the skeleton that she didn't bear any kids, but other than that, we do not know what is the cause of her death. But what we can learn about her as a person is that she was a woman of taste, she was a woman of wealth, and it's very likely that she was Christian, and we know this from the stuff she was buried with. So as you can see, she has some glass beads that would have been around her neck. She has some yellow earrings. She's got a bottle that would probably have had oil or perfume in it. She's got a little disc next to her, which would have been a little mirror. And the long thing at the top, is a little inscription, says something along the lines of, "God hail our sister." And here we have her. So this is a facial reconstruction of what Our Lady may have looked like. We know she's of mixed race, and this is what she would have looked like. She was a woman in her late teens, early 20s. She moved from Africa to Britain. She was of wealth, and from doing radiocarbon dating, we found out that she is actually Roman. Now, originally when her body was found, she did actually have a coffin, but because she was found in 1901, we don't actually know what happened to said coffin. There's also certain parts of her body that's missing as well, but that could be a cataloguing issue. But this is just some of the stuff you can learn from skeletal remains. From what we can gather is she probably came to Britain either following her husband or following her father, and she was starting her life here, but unfortunately died here as well. She wasn't a slave. She was a wealthy woman with wealthy tastes and followed the local fashions. There you go. So there you have it. That's what you can learn when you do osteoarchaeology. What I've just been talking about is the very basics of what you can learn from skeletal remains. You can learn so much from looking at a skeleton. There's also a lot we can't learn as well, because the body doesn't tell everything. And unfortunately for future archaeologists, it's going to be a lot harder to find out where people come from, what their lifestyle was like, due to the fact that people use the gym and our food is from all over the place. You could still probably find signatures if the person in question was drinking water, because from the local area they have a signature. But other than that, I feel that osteoarchaeology is going to be a lot harder for future archaeologists. But this is just one of the studies that archaeologists do, or one of the fields that archaeologists can go into, and I find it a very fascinating study. There's still loads to learn.